Welcome to the week 9 video. So on this next page, you're going to see where each of the problems begin. Remember, you can fast forward to the problems that you need. You don't need to listen to me on all of them, only the ones that you got wrong. Here you go. All right, here we are on the week 9 test. We're going to go through each of the problems. You don't need to go through it problem by problem. You can skip forward to the ones that you had difficulty with. There was a quick guide at the beginning of the video with the approximate times that each question starts. So feel free to jump as you need to jump. Let's jump into number 1. So in problem 1, we're doing two things. In problem 1, we are distributing distributive property and we are solving an equation. The distributive property part is going to be what we see first. When we talk about distributive property, we're talking about that idea of the rainbows. Here's a rainbow, 8 times x. 8 times x gives us 8x eventually. Here's a second rainbow, 8 times negative 4. 8 times negative 4 gives us negative 32. You may have left it as x minus 4 and done your work. If you want to do it, that's fine. I find it easier to change to addition. If you did it as subtraction and it worked for you, great. If you left it as subtraction and it didn't work, if that was confusing, then try doing it by changing it to adding the opposite. All right, all of that equals negative 80. Now, we're not going to do anything with that negative 80. Here's our dotted line. We're past the distributive part now. We're on to the equation part. Here's our dotted line. That dotted line tells us whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other. Well, we distributed on one side. There was nothing to distribute, so we just leave the negative 80. And now we're ready to start solving. First step in solving, well, we have this minus 32. Notice the 8x, we're going to keep that because we need to find out what x is, so we can't change anything there. We can change this. We're going to get rid of the negative 32 by adding 32. So we add 32 to each side. When we do that, the 32 disappears. 80 plus negative 80 plus positive 32 is a negative 48. 32 0 pairs. Now we want to divide, get rid of the 8. So since 8 times x, we have to do divided by 8. Divide by 8 there, divide by 8 on the other side, and we get x is equal to negative 6. You should always check that. Here's the negative 6 we said x was equal to. So plug it in. Negative 6 plus negative 4. I left that as a negative. Negative 10, 88, times negative 10 is negative 80. Problem number 2. Mrs. Smith bought 4 boxes of watermelons. Each box contained, there's 4 boxes of melons. Each box contained 2 watermelons and the same number of honeydew melons. If there were 24 melons in total in the 4 boxes, how many honeydew melons in each box? So we have 4 boxes of melons, 4 boxes. We know that each of those boxes has 2 watermelons, and each of those boxes has the same number of honeydew melons. We decided honeydew melons is our x, so there's the honeydew melons. As soon as you write that equation, you can see we are back at the idea of distributing. Here are our rainbows again. So we have 4 times 2, first rainbow. We have 4 times x, which is the second rainbow. That gives us 8 plus 4x. All of that equals 24. Our next step is to take away the 8 to counter that. So we do that on both sides. We get 4x is equal to 16. Divide everything by 4. We get x equals 4. And then because we're really careful and want to check our work before we turn it in, we do the check. All right. We are on to problem number 3. So problem 3 uses actually 3 of the 4 big ideas that we have when we do these angle problems. It uses vertical angles, which are angles across from one another. It uses supplementary angles, which are angles that total 180. It uses the idea that triangles also total 180. And it doesn't use complementary. Complementary is the only one that's not used in this particular problem, and the complementary is the one where angles total 90 degrees. Complementary is half of supplementary. So we're ready to solve the puzzle. So they give us this 50-degree angle. Well, as soon as they give us that, we know that the angle vertical to it is also going to be 50 degrees. They give us this little right angle box, and we know that that means that if you take that right angle box and the angle next to it, those have to total 180 degrees. Those are supplementary. So since that's a 90, we get this 90. And as soon as we have the 2 of those, we go right over to this idea. 50 and 90 make 140. 180 take away the 140. And you might say, wait a second, where did you get that 180? Well, the place I got that 180 is right here. Triangles total 180 degrees. So 180 take away 140 is 40. So that gives us this angle. And then let's put that up in our answer box, and then let's bring it out of our answer box right to there, because these 2 angles are supplementary right here. And since those are supplementary angles, 180 take away the 40 we got for A gives us the 140 for B. All right, on to problem number 4. So on problem 4, once again, we're doing 2 steps. This is an inequality, but it solves just like an equation. It solves just like the second part of number 1 did after we got past the distributive property. The first thing we need to do is we need to cancel out that 14. So we subtract 14 on each side. Now we have 6x greater than or equal to negative 42. Next thing we do is we divide by 6. Remember, we're dividing by 6 because we want this giant 1. Now, in this case, there was no reason to change the direction of the sign. You weren't dividing or multiplying by a negative. Some of you changed it, and I'm concerned that some of you think, well, we just always change it. We always flip it the other way. That's not true. It's only when you're multiplying or dividing by a negative that you change it. So in this case, we get x is greater than or equal to negative 7. Remember, right there, we fill in the circle if it is an equal to part. So we get x greater than or equal to negative 7. Pick some numbers. Make sure your number line is done correctly. Larger numbers to the right. Negative 6 is larger than negative 7. So we use that in our check right here. Plug in the negative 6. There it is right there. Plug in the negative 6. Check it out. We get negative 12 is greater than or equal to negative 28, which we know is true. All right, on to number 5, word problems with an inequality. So Bob wants to spend at most $100. At most means less than or equal to. If he has to, he'll spend $100, but man, he'd sure rather spend $90 or $80. Nobody ever goes on a vacation and says, well, you know, I don't want to spend any more than $100, so I guess I'll spend $120. Nope, it has to be less than $100, but it could be $100. So that's why the symbol we use is the less than or equal to symbol. So he's going to rent a scooter that costs $15 an hour and a $25 maintenance fee. Here's that $25 maintenance fee, plus $15 for every hour. And that per hour In this case, the per hour, the number of hours, is X. So our first step, let me get rid of that highlighting. Our first step is to subtract the 25, take away the maintenance fee, so we can figure out how many hours he can afford. We get 15x is less than or equal to 75. So he's got $75 to spend on the rental of the scooter itself, on the number of hours. Divide everything by 15. That's the coefficient. And we get x, and x is less than or equal to, Bob can ride the scooter for 5 hours or less. Since it's a less than or equal to, we fill in the circle. And if you took your number line, your arrow, and you kept going all the way, if you went all the way, I didn't take off points for it, but to be the most exact, we want to remember that Bob's not going to rent for negative hours. Bob won't even rent for 0 hours. Bob doesn't have like money to throw away. He doesn't walk in and go, hey, I want to rent a scooter for no hours. Here's $25 for my maintenance fee. Nope. So Bob's going to have something between 5 hours and 0 hours. Okay, you can go back over either of those if you need to. We're going to flip to the back of the page, and we're going to be on the geometry problem. Now, this one I can't really show you. I don't have the way of showing you how to do this on this. I'm thinking about making a video just with a few live shots of me with a protractor. I'm sure you're just excited about that idea. So this is what yours should have looked like. I'll tell you the order I did things in. The first thing I did was I drew this 3 centimeter line. Then, thinking about placing my protractor right there, I put the little dot on my protractor there. I looked at where 60 degrees were, and there's my 60-degree mark. So then I drew this line, my next step. The next thing I did was to draw this 3 centimeter line. Notice I didn't draw all the way to my mark. That would have been way over 3 centimeters. The very next step, I put another dot at this end of my line, and I measured a 60, and it came right there. And you'll notice this time when I drew my line, I actually drew it past. I did that purposely because I wanted you to see I can draw it past that and still have a triangle where these two connect right there. That makes another 3 centimeters. And I measured this to make sure, and yes, that little section right there, the section that's actually the triangle, was 3 centimeters long. So again, my steps, let me get rid of all of those things. Here were my steps again. Step 1, step 2, step 3, draw that line, make sure it was only 3 centimeters. Step 4, line up my protractor again. Step 5, figure out where 60 degrees was, draw my line and make sure that I actually had a triangle that was equilateral, 3 angles that are 60 degrees. And I actually put my protractor on there again, and I checked this angle to see, and yes, it was 60 degrees. All right, let's take all those things off again, because they're... Actually, you know what, let's just leave them there. You're fine with those, right? Moving on. Problem number 8. So, problem number 8, we're back to the idea of two-step equations. Step 1 is to get rid of that 25. That's way too dark a highlighter color. I thought I had the green. There we go. Get rid of the 25 by subtracting a 25 from both sides. Now, this is one of those places, you know, I'm noticing students are still, some of you are still running into that problem with a negative taking away another number. And I'm not sure why some of you don't. Take the time when you have a problem like this. Negative 23 take away 25. My experience is you will be a lot more successful if you change that to negative 23 plus negative 25. Because now you can see no zero pairs. You're going to put those two things together, and you're going to get negative 48. Not one of my better 8s. And then the last step, divide by the negative 6. Remember, big 1 right there, big 1, big 1. Divide by the negative 6, divide by the negative 6. Negative divided by negative, positive 8 as an answer. Take that positive 8, stick it into the original problem and check. Take the time to do this. It only takes an extra 30 seconds, maybe a minute. Let's say it takes 2 minutes. 2 minutes to realize, oh, you know what? I put a negative 8 there. That didn't work. I should have made it positive 8. That's why we check. Number 9. Matthias bought 3 video games that cost the same amount as each other. When you see that, think of as each other. He spent a total of $57 using a coupon that gave him, not game him, they didn't game him, that gave him $15 off his purchase. How much did each video game cost? So, bought 3 video games. He bought them, and when he got them to the counter and the person rang them up, he said, oh, wait, I have a coupon for 15 off. So we have to subtract the 15 here. We're subtracting it from the original price of the games. So we take away the 15. We get $72. We divide that by 3. Each game was originally $24. Now, he didn't have to pay $24 a game because he had that coupon. But each game was originally $24. And then take that $24, put it in, and we find out that he had exactly that $24 a game. All right, we're down to the last of our problems. The video's run almost 20 minutes. Let's see if we can get in for under 20 minutes. So, it's another one of those puzzles. In this case, we're using vertical angles for all of it. Now, you could, actually, we're not using vertical for all of it. We're using supplementary for one of them. So the vertical part, they gave us this 58. Well, then that gives us this 58. Those are vertical. Oh, by the way, before I get to there, they asked us to write an equation to find x. Here's our equation to find x. Take 180, which is a total line. Subtract the 58, we get the x right here. That gives us our 122. We could also use supplementary angles to get the 122. We could have done this and said, I know that's 180. I know that totals 180 degrees. Same idea. That's that equation for x. As soon as we have that, then everything else is vertical. This 58 is vertical to that 58. This 122, let me do that with a highlighter. This 122 is vertical to that 122. Okay, so you have all of week 9 there. You have concepts 7, 8, and 9. So go back, watch whatever you need to watch. Remember, if you haven't gotten these right yet, that doesn't mean you can't understand them. It just means you don't understand them yet. Do some extra work on it. Do some peer tutoring. Ask some questions. I'm convinced that you can do all of these. You just need to be convinced also.